You know Josh Luber from StockX, from Fanatics, and from his really long white papers. He did one in 2021, and he's back again here in February 2026 with Jesse Einhorn as his co-author with the BlindBoxification of Everything. And what a great title. I loved how specific it was, and yet how long it was. There were so many components of it. Um, you know, you built Ghostwrite, which is the current company that you founded based on like this scarcity that like if you pay attention to every single part of scarcity, you can rig the system to really make it scarce and really want people you know, to love that. So it's interesting. I feel like you are the person to talk about this. All right, so let's talk about blind boxes. I think started in Japan, really. But the idea has always been that a pack of cards is always a blind box, right?
That's right. I mean, look, this is just about our generation growing up collecting cards, and now we're the ones making businesses. We're the ones making videos. We're the ones creating companies, and we like Ghostwrite is just trading cards. Blind Box is just trading cards, and like the influence that whatever the Griffey 89 Upper Deck has had on all of our careers, like that's what this is, man. And it's a blast to be able to do it. It's a blast to be able to do it.
Now, what's crazy is because you asked me to participate too, and I have a footnote in there talking about kind of the dopamine of a blind box. What's crazy is, and you mentioned this also in your tome, uh, when people when you say to a kid, "Hey, what card you looking for?" and he says, "I'm looking for X," and then you're like, "Well, why don't we just buy it?" No. I mean,
Yeah.
if that doesn't talk to the energy behind the process instead of what the process yields, I don't know what does.
Yeah, you hit on a couple things that we should talk about. So, we wanted to make the white paper itself a blind box, and we came up with a million different ways to do that. And then we said, what's the simplest way? Which is, we asked 17 people to write 17 different footnotes, and I'm very thankful, appreciate that you did it as one of those 17 people. And then it's just random. When you load the website, you get one of those 17 people. Um, but what was really interesting is those 17 people choosing what to write about. And they're all people that are in a hobby in some way. And a lot of people chose to write about the very specific thing. We made the footnote to the Paul Skeens Dick's Sporting Goods sale. But you, Gary, Chris from Car Ladder, maybe one or two other people decided to talk about something broadly. You and Gary both talked about experience and what happens. We quoted you. Did you see that? That we actually quoted
Yes,
you. That
you
in
called me
the
doctor. Yep, yeah.
yeah, right. But like that, this whole thing is about just what is the experience of opening up a pack of cards, of opening up a blind box. And my son is 10 years old, and he follows Ghostwrite, and like doing this with him is so much fun. But oh my god, every day he comes home and he's like, "What are we opening today? What are we opening today?" I'm like,
I got
"Bobby,
an
these
11
things
year old.
cost
I'm
money."
one above you. I got an 11-year-old. It's the same thing.
And it's just the experience. He open and then as soon as he opens it, he doesn't care about it at all, at all.
My son doesn't care if he got his favorite player.
Yeah,
If it does not have a scarcity dynamic, he doesn't care. Even if it's his favorite player base card,
yeah,
which I think young people have been told that they're not collectors, they're flippers. And you actually address this in the paper as well, which is like, why do we shouldn't care about their process if their process is different from us. They opened it up, they got a big break, these guys got a $3 million card. Why not be a collector? Why do you have to be a capitalist? Because that's how they act, that's how it is. It doesn't mean that they should be dumped on for not being the collectors like us.
that's right. And that is exactly right. We when we came up, we didn't have the ability to just keep ripping and hit something to give us the opportunity to like. It was okay. It was a different thing, and so today's and literally, like, if there's like a point to the whole paper, it's that this is only going farther in that direction. And the whole idea of blind boxification of everything being these all these other companies, the sort of like non-collectibles companies that are now trying to figure out, well, how do we take advantage of that? How do we bring that into our business? And Lububu sort of made this a broader thing, beyond collectibles. And now you have every company trying to figure out, how do we get that gamified aspect? How do we get that experience into our product? And maybe it's good and maybe it's bad. But either way, that's what's happening and that's the direction it's going.
It's funny, like the Cracker Jack prize was never good. There wasn't even
Never
any Cracker
garbage.
Jack. Right, right. You couldn't have won anything,
Yeah.
but we and I don't know if I even like Cracker Jacks, but I got to open the prize. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that like I feel like we are in a dopamine nation, and if it's not sports gambling, and you needed to, if I could add what you probably added, this is what I'm thinking. In the last like 40 days, you had to pound more on prediction markets because it has just kind of gotten that same type of dopamine as sports gambling, as opening cards, as crypto. And I feel like everyone just needs to be on a higher level. So the fact that you did talk
Yeah.
about gambling was one, but I actually did also like that you put in Phil Mushnick, the ultimate curmudgeon, uh,
Yeah.
who
What?
who
By the
who
way, what a
said
name, Darren! What a name for the ultimate
Phil
curmudgeon.
Mushnick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that Seymour? Oh, it was Seymour Krelborn, but Mushnick was the flower shop guy in Little
Yeah.
Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Phil Mushnick, who never wrote a positive column in his life, of course, said that this is horrible because card companies are preying on kids who are into gambling. And you noted basically that Phil lost this argument because as gambling becomes normalized,
Right.
it's fine. It's
It's
fine
fun.
now.
Yeah.
So that was also interesting to me that we have to look at the world around us, and that normalizing, makes everything else okay.
Well, what actually one of the things that really surprised us as we were going through the research was how well temporally the mainstreamification of gambling mapped with commerce. So, like, sports gambling really changed in 2018 with the Supreme Court case, which legalized
Yep.
sports gambling, and then we've gone. But in 2018, then you look across the aisle to what was happening in trading cards and collectibles and everything else, and you have this the whole way down for a decade. And we have a chart in there that compares the two. But there's a lot of things as we were writing this paper that not I wouldn't say surprised us, but it was like, okay, this like it makes sense of sort of how we've gotten to where we've gotten to, and the mainstreamification of sports gambling is at the core of all of it, right? Because sports is the collector, trading cards and collectability and everything else, and now you walk into an NBA arena and you can bet on games that you're watching. So
Now you have a situation where Fanatics is you're buying base cards for the chance to get the one of one. You might buy 50 base cards for the chance to get that one of one. Do
well,
you
by the way, Topps Now and Panini Now, and like, which I've never bought a Now card in my life, is the most ridiculous version of that, right? Because you see people and they're opening up and it's the same card,
literally
that.
throwing them out probably,
Of
right?
course, what are you
Right.
going to do with them? It's
No.
literally worthless. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Do you have concern that, and you talk about mortgage-backed securities and buying buckets of buckets of buckets of buckets, and obviously, the biggest singles buyers are the repackers. Do you have concern that if the card market is not the best game, right? So we only have so many hours in our day. If we are just seeking dopamine and the prediction markets and sports gambling and crypto are working out, do you have concern because it's really, if it is all about the process and not the thing, if the cards actually slip down into there's lack of fun or whatever, that market would absolutely crater because the breakers are buying from breakers and people are opening packs and then they return them. It's the game instead of what it is.
Yeah. I didn't until digital repacks and digital buy. I mean, that's where you can really see that path downward, because if nobody ever takes possession of the cards, even the good ones, and the majority of the cards that are sold at any given moment, I mean, Card Ladder last week just reported another record high for, all
Yeah,
time high
400
for,
million in singles. Yeah.
yeah. But like, that's got to be driven. I mean, it is driven by the repack companies that are out there just scooping up, all of the singles. By the way, it's also why, of course, the high end is so high, and the demand for, well, we have every day, new all time record highs. But like, it's going to be watching that part of the market. I'll say, and I don't have any inside info in terms of data from these companies, but I've heard that the number of customers that are creating the revenue for the repack companies is very small relative to the total revenue, right? Which also makes sense because you have people, gamifying it. So if you have this very small group of people that's driving it, if they get shaken up, if a couple of them, if 20% of them step out of that market, then that might have a big impact. We may sort of like flow back into where we were, but I don't know, man. Like the digital repack and buybacks, like that's the thing to watch.
Do you have any concern for lack of regulation? You talk about other things. Now, you talk about sports gambling. Now, prediction markets do not, for some crazy reason, fall in the same as sports gambling, but there's absolutely nothing in the card space.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think the market will take care of itself for cards. I don't think you need regulation. I think that if you have regulation that comes into prediction markets and these other things, then maybe it sort of bleeds into what we're doing. But I don't think so. I just think that we will take care of ourselves, and I think there's just other things. The administration, all the job cuts, everything that happened earlier this year, or this administration, they clearly don't want to regulate the stuff that's going on anyway,
Correct.
right? So it's like I just think trading cards are so far down the list that if they do decide to change their mind, a new administration comes in a couple of years, maybe, but it's so far down the list.
I really did enjoy the part of the paper that talked about stories that created scarcity, right? Before we had grading, we had Honus Wagner and the 1952 Mickey Mantle based on stories that were probably myth. Now, most people talk about Honus, they know the Honus story. He didn't hate cigarettes, he didn't, he had, God, he had cigars and other things. I mean, that was the scarcity of that T206 card. It's not true. A lot of people haven't focused on the mantle. I'm familiar with it. Tell the mantle story.
Yeah. One of the most fun parts about this, and the thing is 140 pages. We cut 10 pages just on this. I mean, there was so much fun as we went down the rabbit hole of unpacking. The myth that sort of everyone grew up knowing was this idea that that Topps couldn't sell 1952 high, and they dumped them into the ocean, right? That Seiberger, was a Topps executive that dumped all these mantles into the ocean.
And it
Went
was
out
a
on a barge.
complex story that it got more and more detailed over time. We had the high numbers. Kids weren't into baseball by the fall of 52. They were into football. And it wasn't like the old days where that was Mickey Mantle's Topps rookie. No one thought about that. They just wanted to get to the 53 set. And then it kept getting pushed down and down and down. And then, he just comes up with this again. The fact that they tried to sell it at carnivals and everything for a cent each, couldn't get rid of it, literal garbage.
And what's great is that as a hobby, we sort of have this idea that there's mantles at the bottom of the ocean. Like that, that idea that they were there, they were so, and obviously if they are in the water, they're completely damaged. But and then all the things that went on with that, and you look at how a card became rare back then, right? Because there was no serial numbers, there was no short prints, there was like every card was a base card. There was no difference in supply, and a decade and then another decade, and another decade. And now you look up, and it's 50 years later, it's 70 years later of telling the story. And I mean, what would a Mantle 10 go for if it showed up on auction? 30 million, 40 million,
More.
like, right?
None of the three people would do it at 30 million, it appears.
Right. Right. So, and by the way, all you need is two billionaires who say, I want to own that thing, and right. It's all about that story because, like, it's not that much more rare than. By the way, there's only one PSA 10 Maze, right? So
Yeah, and as you say in the paper, Mays was by all categories a better player.
everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. And so, but the whole thing was a hoax, or the whole thing was a myth that never happened. That he never dumped the cards off, off a barge. But it doesn't matter. What mattered is that for decades we had this idea that this card was scarce for this reason, and then you have compounding decades of myth that goes on top of it, and that's
Right. And the craziest thing, part of it, what doesn't make sense is Woody Gelman helped make the 1952 top set with Cy Berger. They had the kitchen table, the whole story, and Woody Gelman was the number one card dealer. He had the card catalog. And if you look at the card catalog, I have a card catalog from 1956. The high numbers are worth more than the low numbers. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And the first time he told this story, at least from what I could see, was in 1975. So it would have been 15 years after he dumped it, or they dumped it. And it was at the biggest card show at the time in Baltimore, told us the Baltimore Sun. And then over time, it's just there wasn't really any check. Like we didn't know what body of water. There's a whole bunch of things, but it has become, such this mythic story.
then for the next 20 years, obviously 75, 10 years later, you start to get into the 80s and the junk wax era and then all the hype that happens. But if you're in 1986, you're at a card show and you see a mantle sitting there and the dealer says, oh, there's only 30 of these. There's only, like, how are you going to know? How are you going to know it's out there? Like, you have this story that, I mean, it works so well. It works so well, and it's reflected in the values today. But it's not going to change. Like, we can tell the story of what really happened. It doesn't matter, right? Like, it's already imputed into the value, and it's not going to change.
Do you have any fears about the future on this blind boxification of everything?
No, I don't think fear as much as I would say that once large corporations figure out the right way to engage with it, I think it'll be really interesting to see. Right now, so let's just take Labubu. Labubu was this phenomenon, and most stories that reported it talked about K-pop, Rihanna, TikTok, these cute little things that women wear in the purse. Most of them missed the part of the story that it was sold as a blind box. But that mechanism is what created the hype, and it was what created the resale market that grew so much faster than the word that spread. I mean, what happened to Lububu was in 6 months, the same thing that happened to Beanie Babies in 6 years. Right? We're just in a society with internet and everything else where commerce moves faster. And then so all these other brands that how do we get that hype? How do we get that energy? How do we get that experience for our customers? But the reality is that depending on your brand, your purpose of why you're doing that, you can have disastrous effects. I mean, the best example, my favorite part of the whole the whole white paper is the example of Le Creuset, the cookware. Those orange pots that are expensive, high-end cookware.
The crock pots, yeah.
That's right. And so they did a clearance sale, a blind box clearance sale. It's $50 a box. Every product that you could get had a retail price of greater than $50. But the big win was like a Dutch oven that had a retail price of like $500 or $1,000. If you the bad hits were like spatulas and mugs, but their retail price was over $50. But it didn't matter. It was a disaster. It was a complete PR disaster because the Le Creuset customer, they're not used to blind boxes. They're not used to not getting the hit that they want and get.
So it's of everything, but it's not guaranteed to be a success if you don't do it right.
And it doesn't align with the brand. It's like, could you imagine like Louis Vuitton, like,
No.
Exactly. And so, this is like a perfect example of like how these things have to evolve. But there may be a way that for Le Creuset to create a gamified product, but that ain't it, right? And it's not for clearance. It's not to do it like that. And so I say it'll be interesting to see over the next, I don't know, half a decade as different brands figure out the right way to integrate this into their business. And some businesses will be easier than others, right? Sports, ticketing, anything with, on this side of that collector aisle will be fun. But, it's been
The
crazy.
sweepstakes have existed forever.
That's right.
You wonder if, the guy who got the unlimited plane miles in the puddings, if that wasn't a QR code, or not a QR code, if that wasn't a serial number code, and he had to send it in. Imagine if planes just come in puddings. I mean, that's kind of
Right.
it's the next evolution
It
of
is.
the
It is.
prize.
Yeah. But the second we publish this, Jesse and I have been like writing down all the things like, oh, we should have put that, we should have put that. But like Cracker Jacks, right? Like I need to add that to V2, right? It's been going on since Cracker Jacks. That was the first one. We gotta add Cracker Jacks to the paper.
Josh Luber, the blind boxification of everything. with Jesse Einhorn. Truly a gift, really cool. Thanks for involving me a little bit. And I hope everyone reads it. And I'm not talking about the 130 pages. However you read it, you should just take a peek. And if you need to skim, that's not a crime. It's just at least skimming makes a lot of sense. So thanks for enlightening us, and we'll see another one in 2030.
That's right. Thanks for having me, Darren. Thanks for participating. I appreciate it.